Both industrial production and domestic demand in China rose last month, according to data from China's National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. Retail sales saw a boost, up 2.7% year on year in July, coming in at nearly $530 billion. Consumer spending on services was up about 7.2% annually. Summer holiday travel giving a boost to both transportation as well as the lucrative tourism industry. And industrial output also rose more than 5% year on year. However, that was a bit less than expected, a very small bit. Officials warned that external pressures and weaker demand remain challenges to continued economic growth. Okay, joining us to talk more about all of this, Yan Liang. She is the chair professor in economics at Willamette University. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for taking time to chat with us.
Good to talk to you, Sean. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Okay, so we have a lot of information out on China's economy, and a lot of it pointing out at best that it's kind of a mixed bag right now. I want to get your takeaway, starting with what you perceive as the positive news.
Right. So I think the spokesperson from the NBS described the economy as, generally stable with steady progress. And I think that is the right characterization of the economy. So you mentioned, for example, the retail sales. We heard a lot about, China's insufficient domestic demand, especially consumption demand is still low. But we're seeing, in July, that has gone up by 2.7%, accelerated from the 2% annual growth back in June. So that is I think, a positive sign that consumption growth is accelerating. And when you look at the industrial output growth, and you just mentioned a number about 5.1%, but when we look at, for example, high-tech manufacturing, that has gone up by 10%. So I think really this idea of upgrading industrial structure, upscale production is happening right now. So this whole idea of boosting productivity, so that would help to drive more innovation-driven and quality growth, and that would help to generate more high-quality and high-paid jobs, and that would help to fuel consumption growth. So I think this is a virtuous cycle. And we're also seeing export growth has been pretty strong. The first 7 months, the export growth increased by 6.7%. So I think that is a helpful boost as far as demand is concerned.
Okay, you talked about those numbers, and the government and President Xi have made it crystal clear that innovation, quality manufacturing is going to be its priority. So let's examine that a bit more. You talked about it. Manufacturing is up 5.1%. It's a miss, but albeit very small, but you talked about how significant it has been for the high innovation, high quality. Now, even though economists were looking for 5.2%, help us put that in perspective just a bit, if you will, because it seems like making such a big change is going to come with challenges.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very clear that the real estate sector continues to be the drag. When we look at the new home prices, it has fallen again by another 4%. That's after months of continuous decline. And the real estate sector investment has declined by 10%. So I think all of this dragged down in terms of the growth momentum, because these are the old growth driver of the economy. And of course, they have negative impacts on consumption as well, because home value is declining, and that creates the negative wealth effect for the families. Not to mention, when people are not buying new homes, they're not buying the appliances, they're not buying all these furniture, and so that would drag down on the real, the retail consumption goods growth. So I think all these shows the pains are still being felt in the economy because of these old drivers were weakening. But at the same time, I think this new quality development that focusing on high-end manufacturing, and also I think now really a lot of focus on boosting consumption in services sector. I think this is very important. When you look at the number, last year the retail sales of services have gone up by 20%, but the investment in that sector is less than 1%. What that means is that there's a lot of potential to grow the service sector from the current only about 50% to the GDP to a much higher level. The United States is 70%. And that would create a lot of jobs in the service sector and also upgrade the service sector's productivity. That's going to create more high-paid jobs. And I think all of those would then create a healthy momentum because, when the consumption is low, you can't directly stimulate consumption, right? By giving people a couple thousands of yuan and ask them to spend, that's not really going to help, because right now is the consumer confidence is low because people are worried about their income and they're worried about their house values. So I think we need to think about this in a more strategic and holistic way.
Yeah, indeed. The biggest purchase they have, they want to make sure that value is going to be there. But so far, China has not felt compelled to have a massive, costly stimulus package. What do you make of this? And does it show faith in this notion of more innovation, high innovation, manufacturing moving forward, and potentially more internal consumption and more purchasing going on in China, and perhaps also some positive news on the home front.
Right. I'm totally not against more fiscal stimulus, especially coming from the central government. But we know the local governments now are having debt, issues. Local governments are piling on a lot of debt. So I think that is very important to solve. And so that is not going to, happen without the more sort of structural fiscal reform. On the other hand, I think, this whole idea of a bazooka kind of flooding the market with fiscal stimulus or monetary easing is not really going to solve some of the structural issues. And so I think, as the third plenum has made a decision that more deepening structural reform is really needed. So some of these, again, of course, has to do with, upgrading the productivity level to graduate out of the middle income trap, but also create more jobs and also bridge the gap between the rural and the urban, relax the hukou restrictions, promote the private sector growth. I think all of these are much more important to solve the structural issues. And again, let's face it, China is not having economic crises right now. I mean, 5% growth in the real terms, it's not a crisis. So I think it's important to really understand, what are the structural impediments in the Chinese economy and try to come up with structural reforms as opposed to simply flood the market with money.
And now, Yan Liang, quickly, we know where the Chinese economy has been the first half of this year. Big question, where's it going in the third quarter? I want to get your thoughts.
Right. So again, I just mentioned that the third plenum has just concluded. So I think we are likely to see more concrete policies coming down, from the pipeline. So again, my hope is that there will be more forceful measures taken to address local government debt, because local governments are really important in both promoting their local economies, but also providing very essential social programs and services to the people. And I think only through, these government policies and programs that would really help people to ease the anxieties about job growth and their income and the safety, a safety net. So I think that is what I would hoping to see, and I think the government is going to do that. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Commerce has talked about promoting service consumption, and I think that is also on the right track.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that and hopefully chat with you again soon. Yan Liang, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Sean.